Hey, it's Steve Goldberg, and I'm going to demonstrate some changes that I've just made to my plugin called A Better Camera. I'll show you this is version 747, which I hope to launch sometime around today, March 16th, 2024. Hopefully it'll be today, maybe tomorrow. Launching version 1.7, release candidate 2. And one of the cool things, there's a bunch of fixes in this, but there's a lot of really cool features as well. So I'll talk first about some minor changes, but they're kind of relevant. There's this zoom lock feature, which if you have the status bar on in the cockpit, you'll see. And it allows you to click right here to turn on and off zoom lock. What zoom lock is, it says plus, meaning it's on right now, is you can't tell, but I'm actuating the scroll wheel, the mouse wheel, and nothing's happening. If I hold down the Z key, because I've set it up this way, it zooms in and out. By the way, it's extremely slow. That has nothing to do with, well, it does have something to do with X-Plane 12 on my Mac, but it also has a great deal to do with the fact that I'm doing a screen recording. It just really eats the machine, unfortunately. So forget that if you can, but that zoom that you saw, that was because it's disabled. You have to hold down a key to get it to zoom. That's the zoom lock feature. Yet if I had this cockpit up and running, the mouse wheel would actuate these different controls. You see that actually did change the altimeter there. So it's working, and it's exactly what you want. This is actually an X-Plane feature. I've had zoom lock for a while, since 1.6 final. So the idea is to just turn on the X-Plane feature. But the problem with the X-Plane feature is that if we go out to the Shift 4, the circle view, for example, to the exterior camera, well, except for the fact that ABC fixes this, X-Plane would actually defeat zoom lock here, or defeat the zoom here. So I wouldn't be able to use my mouse wheel like I am right now to zoom in and out. It wouldn't work by default. But because I've got this feature in the X-Plane cockpit, that actually makes it so that zoom lock only happens inside the cockpit. So I'm zooming now, you can't tell, nothing happens. In fact, little known fact, you can actually say next target in X-Plane and actually go to different targets. So now I'm in aircraft number 4, which is this Boeing. And unfortunately, I can't find a way to turn off the animation or the these heads, pilots' heads, but in the AI aircraft. But basically, in this cockpit, you know, a user can't actuate any of these controls. Oh, the reason these guys are doing that is because I have, this is one of the minor inconveniences of the ABC feature, which is on, you'll see it here, called primetime mode. And it's basically keeping the time at 6 o'clock. And so after a second or two, it resets the clock back, and that's what's causing the animations. These are driven off the sim clock. Nothing else seems to be. So you can actually do it pretty well in X-Plane, but animations like that are, unfortunately, as well as the lights flashing on the outside. But anyway, so if you see here, when I use the zoom wheel, it actually zooms. And that's because it was such overkill for X-Plane to make that switch when you turn it on, asking it to block scroll wheel zooming. It was such overkill for them to do that everywhere. You don't need it in anywhere but the user plane. So that's what ABC does. So the new implementation, notice it doesn't even show up here. The new implementation of zoom lock is to restrict it. It used to do it a different way. So if you play with 1.6 and you did the same experiment I'm doing right now, you'd get the same result, except the scroll wheel zoom you would be seeing would be the ABC scroll wheel zoom. I can't demo it anymore because it no longer does that. And ABC's got a much faster touch. It doesn't feel the same. It's not the same feature, really, as the scroll wheel zoom that you get with X-Plane. And so I thought it was better to remove myself from the picture and instead just give the users what they want. If you want to use ABC's scroll wheel to zoom, there's an override setting you can enable. Otherwise, you'll get ABC's scroll wheel zoom here in exterior views. It's much harder, much faster touch. And it also doesn't animate nearly as much, if at all, really. But if you take over the X-Plane views camera with the scroll wheel using that override, it will do both. It'll animate and go really fast, so it's a little bit disconcerting. So anyway, I just made it where it's less in the way, and I think that's better. And it actually fixes a lot of stuff with the way X-Plane's feature works. So I think this is a good improvement. It's much less involved than it was in the previous version. All it's doing is turning on zoom lock when you come into the cockpit and turning it off when you leave. But you can't see it because, like the refrigerator light, this switch disappears when you're no longer in the cockpit, so you can't see that it's off. And it's actually a setting that stays on, of course, but the interior, the data ref that actually represents the state in X-Plane is being set on and off. And the problem, though, there's one other caveat here. It was true with the old version, but this is even more true. You can't set the X-Plane override that turns off the mouse wheel. You can't set that independently if you're using ABC, because ABC will force it off. If zoom lock is off here, right, which means now you can scroll using X-Plane's mouse scrolling in the cockpit, mouse wheel scrolling, it'll be off everywhere. And it doesn't matter what you do, any plugin you have that might set that override, it will ignore, because ABC's in control. So I will probably add another setting in the expert settings that lets you ask ABC to kindly step aside from handling it at all if you really don't want to have anything to do with the zoom lock. So it'll, actually, I think I already have a setting like this. I don't think it's honoring it for that thing, but you can ask it not to show zoom lock here. So I suppose that would really be the same setting, because this is the only place you'll ever see it, is right here. So anyway, that's that feature. That's a important change. Another important change, while we're on the subject of interior views, I don't know if people know this, but X-Plane has a huge bug or deficit or oversight, or I think maybe implementation detail that gets in the way of users in the way they handle zoom. This is unrelated to the scroll wheel zoom, but in the way they handle zoom in the cockpit in general. So if I hit Shift 9, for example, you notice that we're zoomed out all the way. I can't really prove it to you, but just trust me, we're zoomed out all the way. And you can use the plus and minus keys to zoom in and out. This is X-Plane's zoom. ABC's not doing much right now in the cockpit. But if I were to want to set the zoom to a specific level in the cockpit, plugins can do all sorts of stuff. They can, like, XP Realistic and all these different plugins can move the camera by themselves, right? They can simulate physics by moving the camera. But you know what they can't do? Turns out they can't set the zoom level. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. There's absolutely no way in X-Plane to programmatically set the zoom level in the cockpit. You can set everything else programmatically. You can set the pitch, the roll of the camera. You can set the position of the camera programmatically. You can do all that, but you can't set the zoom level. And so if you try to, but you can do it in one case, which I'm sure you're sitting there shaking your head going, no, you can do it. Well, yes, in one case. In the case that you save a cockpit, 3D cockpit's position to the aircraft. So this is the user aircraft. So this is a very restrictive situation. It only works for the user aircraft. In this case, the Cessna Citation 750. If I were to ask X-Plane to save this using maybe the numpad plus controller or whatever, I could save a view like this. It would restore this correctly, but that's where it ends. I can't bring that view into another aircraft, for example. So, and I certainly can't switch to using the thing I did earlier to go to to a different plane, let's say the 747, and go inside its cockpit, or not the 737. Sorry, I can't recall that saved cockpit zoom because that's saved with the .acf file in the same directory as the .acf file for the other aircraft, not this one, and it wouldn't be right anyway if I tried to do it. Right? So that's a really fundamental thing. And Not only that, the only way to get into the interior view, which is a really cool feature, you notice not many people even necessarily know this is a feature, but in X-Plane, this is ABC. Let's get out of ABC. So we're in X-Plane circle right now. Or we can go into chase if you prefer. So in X-Plane chase, we're looking around the target here. In fact, we can even go to ride along, which is a little more appropriate in this situation. In X-Plane 12, and actually in X-Plane 11.5 plus, you can actually move the camera all the way to the center of the aircraft. So you can actually put the exterior camera in an interior view, but you notice things aren't really right. Like the camera's not moving the way you would expect it to. Well, that's okay. That's because it's an exterior camera. It's not an interior camera. But X-Plane has an interior camera. But the only way to get to it, there's no command, there's no mode, there's no API that lets the user say, take the camera. Let's say I've even got the zoom level at a particular level. You can't take the camera and put it inside the cockpit, inside the aircraft, and make it into an interior view where the keys move relative to the aircraft instead of relative to the exterior view that you're in. Because right now we're in ride-along view. If we were in circle view, it'd be even different. But unfortunately, you can't convert a view in X-Plane either. So I can't go from this to circle view without resetting the camera completely. So both of those are related issues. So ABC, of course, to the rescue, because ABC has two features. One of them is the ability to acquire, well, it's actually the same feature, but they're separate commands. So the ability to acquire an exterior view from an exterior view in X-Plane, or even an interior view. So if I hit this command, which is tether, now I've converted this camera view that was an exterior view in X-Plane into an ABC ride-along view. And right away, you can start to see some of the differences in the implementations because I've completely reverse engineered ride-along view. And they're using data here that I don't have. Well, I might. I just haven't figured it out. And it doesn't seem to have this type of data for every aircraft. And ABC wants to work the same way for all aircraft, not just for the AI aircraft. So, like, because there's all these, here, I'll open this thing. There's 62 right now, live traffic aircraft over here. And if I switch to this target, preserving the view, that's not exactly a very useful view because we're inside the aircraft like we were before, but we're not in the same position, right? And again, the data that I'm getting doesn't necessarily give me all the angles I need to calculate this camera view correctly. And there's probably bugs in my algorithm since I just kind of came up with it on my own. So anyway, let's switch back to the previous target, which was the one we were just in. And unfortunately, it's now rolled hard to the right, so it's going to look totally different. You see how off it is. It's not the best demo because of that. They don't usually roll very much, but this one's rolling. So the problem is, how do I switch back to an X-Plane view? There's a problem. There's no command that does that. The only thing I can do is I can switch to a predefined view. Like if I use one of the numpad saved views, by the way, if ABC didn't override it, which it will, and put me in the user plane, those wouldn't work at all because it would apply the saved view from the user aircraft to this AI aircraft, which would be wrong. But ABC offers a really cool view. We're going to have to use two commands here. We're going to have to do the re-aim command right after this. Actually, we can do it now. No, it doesn't quite work the same. But anyway, so what we can do is we can say capture interior view in ABC. And this is going to do what we want, but you're going to notice it doing an animation. Watch. Okay, so I just did two things. I hit one command, which was capture. Let's do the second thing, which is re-aim. So I've done a capture and a re-aim, and now we're back inside the internal cockpit camera. So we're in X-Plane's camera now. We're not in ABC anymore. The ABC re-aim command, all it does is whatever the angles that the camera's at, it just re-aims directly forward in the coordinate system of the interior camera, which is trivial because we don't have to do any mapping of camera angles. I have no idea what the aircraft's doing at this point, right? I don't need to know. But the point is, the second thing you saw was an animation. Did you notice that? Let's see if I can replicate this. We'll go back to X-Plane. We're not in the same exact spot because it's still rotating different directions. All right, and then I'm going to do the same capture again, a new capture. You see that animation that happened? That's the second thing, which is what I started talking about, zoom. It turns out in X-Plane, there's no way to set the zoom, but if you want to try to simulate it as a plugin like ABC is trying to do, where I'm trying to replicate what the user's zoom really was, but in a fake interior view, I'll re-aim again. The only way to do that is you have to take multiple cycles to set this. You can't set a data ref, or if you know what that is, or call an API call if you know what that is, to set the zoom. You have to send the command zoom in slow, or zoom in fast, and zoom out slow, zoom out, or zoom out fast. So that's just like hitting these keys, right? And then you can, here, I'll bring up a debug screen so you can kind of see right here, this 1 out of a million little things here is the zoom. So it's 3.3. That's the actual zoom level we're in right now. And if I hit the minus key, you see it comes out. So you can sense the zoom, but it turns out as a plugin, if I send the command to zoom in fast and I find out how far it went and try to do the math to like send the number of zoom in fasts I need to get the zoom level to, let's say 5 or whatever we're trying to get to, right? And then I have to go back a little like that. That can't be done in one cycle of X-Plane. For whatever reason, the way the zoom in command, which is the only way I have to zoom in, that takes multiple cycles to execute, at least one. So I have to give up control of the camera or of anything, wait until the next flight loop, get called again as a plugin, and then check and see where I am and try again. So I have to issue multiple of these commands. I know it's a lot of detail, but I just wanted to explain that to you. So let's do this one more time. Now that we're at zoom level 5, I want you to watch the zoom level. First, I'm going to capture this as an exterior view. I'm just going to do a recapture. And you notice when you capture, now I'm in ABC, I was able to set the exterior camera to exactly 5. Ignore these other numbers here. So this 5 is the current captured exterior, and then the aircraft's flying flat now, which makes things a little less annoying, right? And I don't want to zoom out just because I want to keep it at 5. Now I'm going to do the capture again, the ABC interior capture, interior tether it's called. And you saw the interesting, it zoomed in and then it zoomed out. And I didn't have to re-aim this time, although I could. Notice we're only at 4.25. I'm going to re-aim. Where's that? This one. Oh yeah, it always is a little bit. But anyway, so you get the idea. It's only at 4.25. Let's do it again. Capture and then reacquire. This time it's at 5.3. So as you can see, it's non-deterministic and actually quite complicated to get it exactly right. And I'll leave it at that. So I just want people to know that I'm now doing this. I now have this algorithm implemented. I will make it better over time. But for now, at least, it's close and it's better than nothing. The other option, of course, is if you do things entirely zoomed out, just to show you the basic concept of the capture. You see, that's a pretty perfect capture. Look, it moved over slightly, but watch. Boom. The capture of the interior is perfect. The capture of the exterior, there's lots of issues at bay there. We can go into another day. But the exterior capture is pretty simple. I mean, the interior capture. It's just math. And I don't have very good math for the angles, but when you're flying flat and level, I do it real good. And I'll get the rest figured out at some point. Because I just have to work it out from first principles. That's how I do things. I'm not using matrix math and all that crap. I'm just using sines, cosines, that kind of thing. Anyway, so that's the thing I wanted to show you. And what I've done is I've codified the ability for ABC to do this interior view conversion and to go back and forth between exterior and interior views that is going to appear much more prominently in the next version of ABC 1.8. I'm going to have the ability for you to toggle between two different views. See right here, I'm toggling between two different views, but they're both exterior views, okay? Here, you can even adjust one of the views. And notice we're in circle view there and ride-along view here. So there's two different camera views. That's the last two views that we looked at. And you notice that the ride-along view, since where I left the camera happened to be a faux interior view. Yeah, and that animation's kind of cute, the way it zooms down. You notice this little eye here, that's just a thing that ABC tells you that this is like a pseudo interior view, because as long as the aircraft's not at a funny angle, the camera, it's backwards actually. You have to go out to go in and down to go up and right to go left. It's a little confusing because it is an exterior view. You get the same result with X-Plane's exterior view. I may actually change that in version 1.8. I may actually start doing more to like make the two views almost identical if I can, where the eye doesn't really matter. The aircraft reset, it respawned. And when that happens, ABC's not sure if maybe this is an AI aircraft that got replaced by the user because it can't tell the difference. Well, it could, but it doesn't. So it just resets the camera. So I lost that saved view, but it doesn't matter. I can always go back in and get a new one. I got to switch back to, what do you call? I could do Shift 6, or that'll reset the whole camera. So what I can do is ABC command for ride along, which converts the view in place, which is a much better way for things to work. If you want a fresh ride along view, you just hit it again. Now I can go between that exterior, now ride along exterior view and an interior ride along view as an exterior view. And then I can capture it. And you notice we were off a little in that case because the pitch is slightly different. So anyway, you'll see I'll fix a lot of this stuff over time. I've had the interior tether for a while now, but it's much better now because I've got the zoom working so much better. And that segues to the next new feature, which is for the saved camera views. Let's show you these. ABC's always had, the third main section is called saved QuickViews. And it's always had 5 memorized QuickViews that you could play back. So you memorize them and load them just like in X-Plane's views. But they were target specific. They weren't really, they were global, but if you captured an interior view, it was for a specific target, which I'll show you in a second. And then on top of that, you can only do 5. And if you wanted to do the other 5, you had to use a key to get to the access to the second 5. So I've made it where that second 5 is now accessible through new commands that I've added. So I've just decided to just use another key. So Alt in this case. So it's Shift is the main. So like Shift X would load quick view number 2. I just have the 5 letters along the bottom. That's my choice. You can use whatever keyboard shortcut method you want. And then it'll load those views. And so now what I've got is the ability to recall a saved quick view that has a cockpit level, because you could always do this you could always do saved cockpit views, but because zoom wasn't restorable until now, the zoom was ignored. So if you have a saved cockpit view as an ABC quick view, you'll need to go to it and then resave it, rememorize it, and it'll correctly do that. The zoom, you have to zoom too, because it'll be zoomed all the way out. It'll be like, whoops, I did the wrong button. It'll be all the way out like this if you do that. But there's also, let's do this one. This is number 2 that I'm loading. So here's the cool thing. So I made this view, right? I just moved the camera in the interior X-Plane cockpit, 3D cockpit view. I saved it as Shift X or whatever. Now, the cool thing is this one doesn't have a zoom. So notice the zoom didn't reset. So that makes it a little easier to visualize. So now what I can do is go to the next aircraft. And this one's a lot smaller, right? This aircraft's a lot smaller than the one I was just showing you. It's not as big a difference as some aircraft, but it is big. Now I'm going to go ahead and load the X. And you notice ABC actually translated the view, the interior view. So we're in a cockpit view. It's not perfect because the shape of this aircraft is totally different. The height is different. Everything's different. But this is my first cut, and I'll work on this over time and make it better. This is my first cut at a heuristic algorithm that tries to figure out where the heck you want the camera in a completely arbitrary aircraft. We'll go to the next one. this is another smaller, even smaller aircraft. We'll try it. Not all of them are going to be right, but this one's pretty good, right? Go to the next one. Now, this is a huge aircraft, much bigger than the one we saved in. And that's where you end up with problems. If the aircraft is smaller than the next aircraft, it's a little harder. I haven't gotten it right yet, but it's close. And this aircraft's differently shaped, and the differences are huge. So you see now we're a little bit too far to the left, I mean to the right. So if I move back to the left and let's say I saved this again, I'll do it as the first one. I'll save it as as number 1. Let's see, is this it? Yeah. So there I memorized quick view number 1. So I have quick view number 2 and quick view number 1, right? And this one was memorized on this aircraft. The other one was memorized on the user aircraft. Let's go back to the user aircraft. And now we'll load number 2 first. This is the original view. And now here's number 1. And you notice that I just shifted, since the bigger aircraft, going from a bigger aircraft to a smaller aircraft is always better. So because we made this view, we saved this view on the bigger aircraft, it's going to be better. But if I move the camera just a little bit further back, just a little bit, let's say there, and then a little bit like this, maybe just a tiny bit higher, and then I save this as the saved number 1, and I go back to the last target, and I apply it. That worked pretty well. It's when you move a lot on big aircraft that things get really wonky, right? Let's see if it works better for these smaller aircraft. Yeah, those work okay. So this one, turns out I got lucky in that last change. It's even better. And you can do that. You can load a saved view and then you can tweak it and save it back again until it works well in every aircraft you have. This one will never work right because it's very narrow. And you end up inside the pilot's head for most things that you would end up doing because of the relative distances. Maybe I can solve it eventually algorithmically, but for now, I don't think I'll be able to. There's another one. This is number 1. If I do number 2, we're a little bit further back. See, they end up being different. It just depends on the ratios of the different aircraft sizes and where the pilot's head spawns within each aircraft. And another bug that I also fixed this bug. If we're here on this aircraft, quote unquote, and we hit the button, it used to just go back to the last viable aircraft and apply it. But that was confusing because you'd actually be in this other, so supposed, let's go to that aircraft right there. Whoops, that didn't do it. Let's try to get it. There we go. So if we were in this aircraft, and we applied that interior view in earlier versions of ABC, it would take you back to the last AI aircraft here and apply that view. So this is what you would have gotten, and that would have been very confusing because you were actually in this other aircraft, right? This 75S, which I don't think it really is one, but we can ask ABC. Yeah, it's modeled of an E195. But anyway, not a big deal. Because it says it's a 750 or 75 or whatever. Anyway, you get the idea. So I'm going to stop there. But this interior, exterior stuff that I'm working on, there's a lot of upside coming soon. I really think in 1.8, I had to undo some stuff. I made a lot more changes for 1.7. But I ended up backing out some of them, and I'll put them back in for 1.8. They include things like, I mentioned this, but the restore last view currently doesn't restore interior views. It only goes back to the last exterior view. So if we were inside the cockpit, you'll be able to do this. Last view, and that would actually take you like this does. If you position the exterior camera in the cockpit, right? Or actually, even better, I could do a shift, this one, for example, and I can just capture that as an exterior view. Now I can say last view. So this is what it's going to look like, because I'm going to fuse these two together. But in the end, it'll end up doing this automatically, right? So you'll actually be captured inside the cockpit because it'll seamlessly, it'll just work. And not only that, but as you saw, the saved QuickViews work, and everything in ABC is actually based on these QuickViews. They're just not saved QuickViews, they're temporary QuickViews, right? So when I do, let's turn off animation just to make it go a little faster. So when I say, go to the next target and then return, oh, I already changed the view. So if I say like, go to the next target and then return to the last view, it remaps the view as well based on the size of the aircraft. That wasn't a very compelling demo, but it doesn't get it right for the going to a bigger aircraft. Same problem, actually. It's all about relativity, I think. But anyway, the point is you'll end up being able to do that and have it preserve, and also preserve the zoom level, which I think is a really important part of all this that's somewhat lost, because you couldn't do zoom before. And now I can capture this as an interior view, even though we're outside the plane. And when I said next target, let me turn it back into an exterior view so it'll actually work. When I say next target, ABC remaps the exterior view based on the aircraft. And you see it doesn't always get it right. Right? And that's because it doesn't really know what your intentions are. And it depends on the one you started with. So if we remap this a little further out and zoom just slightly more and capture this as the one that we're going to rely on ABC to emulate as we move between the targets, it's a little better because it likes the bigger plane. And see, this is even bigger. So we'll go out of it. And then we'll try this. I'm not doing anything. I'm just switching targets. And you see how the view is preserved pretty well now because we're in the biggest. We started with the biggest target. So this has always been like this. ABC's always supported this feature of preserving the view between targets and mapping the size of the camera to make it roughly the same size target, no matter how big it really is. That's always been like that. And so once I can do that with an interior view with just the same amount of ease, I think that's going to greatly improve the usability of the whole plugin. The only problem with it is that historically there's been a huge distinction in ABC between the interior and exterior cameras, partly because of the zoom issue, but mostly because they're just different. There's the API that ABC uses to control the exterior camera is a feature provided by X-Plane, and there is no equivalent feature for the interior camera. There's just data refs you poke into, and all they do is kind of move the pilot's head different ways. And you can certainly move it anywhere, and you can move it instantaneously. You just can't zoom instantaneously, which is very frustrating. But it's, I think within the constraints that we have, it's going to work pretty well. And the other problem with the interior views is they don't work for anything but AI aircraft and the user aircraft. So because these are actual AI aircraft, they work. If these were TCAS aircraft, so if I switch on TCAS and I replace this raft of AI aircraft with what are now, they're models, but they're not the same type of models. They're not .acf files. These are aircraft provided by a plugin, so you really don't have any control. ABC or X-Plane doesn't have any control over them per se. They're just 3D models that are rendered. They're not aircraft from X-Plane's perspective. And so because of that, all this stuff you're seeing, there's no interior rendered. And a lot of this stuff is whatever quality the plugin decided to draw them at. And of course, X-Plane has facilities that help with this. It's not that it doesn't do anything, but it doesn't think of it as an aircraft. It thinks of it as an object, right? A 3D object. So because of that, if I hit W right now, it's not going to work. And it would actually crash older versions of X-Plane. X-Plane 12, it actually doesn't crash. I guess it does work officially, but it doesn't work because the models there's no interior for the models. And also you notice that for live traffic in particular, the y-axis is super low. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I keep hitting the wrong key. I mean to hit E and I hit W, Control W. But anyway, we're way down low below it because in live traffic, the vertical axis is all wrong. The aircraft 00 is the bottom point of the aircraft instead of the center of the aircraft. So I understand why he did it that way, but it makes it much harder to do things like just a priori use the interior camera view of the X-plane inside it. But anyway, despite that, I can still make it work in ABC because at least it'll work. It just may not work that well, but it'll certainly work well inside the regular aircraft, the AI aircraft. And that's my point, is that ABC hasn't focused on this historically, but I think now that I'm starting to look at it, I can find lots of ways to make the feature work a lot better for a lot more people and a lot more use cases. So that's it for now. I got lots more to demo. Look for more videos like this coming soon. And yeah, there's a whole lot I need to demo, but this is one thing anyway. All right, enjoy. Oh, this widget down here, this where it said track most recent. I haven't mentioned it, but that should, hopefully it's obvious. That's just echoing to you what commands I'm hitting, what ABC commands I'm hitting. Here's a good one. Here, let's get rid of that thing. Here's a good ABC command. Scout command. Watch this. Notice how much better the background got. Rewind the video and look at that again. And you'll see. It's actually going to get even better because all the scenery hasn't finished loading. Actually, most of it has. But the roads haven't loaded. Yeah, but anyway. So you can basically force X-Plane into loading all the scenery using ABC Scout mode. It's pretty compelling. But that's for another video, so watch for that video when you get a chance. I just canceled it. All right, thanks for watching. See you later.